let's hydrate ourselves. Welcome back to the rabbit hole. So, from Victorian sass all the way to Tudor verbal annihilation, let's look into phrases that King Henry VIII would say. Some of them are actually quite interesting. Some of them are really similar. Anyway, let's get started. First, let's talk style. Like, come on. The Tudors weren't simply just walking around going, "Oh, you prat!" Like, that's not how they used to insult people. They were entire poetic takedowns. A classic Tudor diss would sound something like, "Thou spongy rump-fed strumpet." It's like a Tudor way of saying, "You pampered, freeloading hot mess." You know, you could kind of use that today. So we're going to move on now to just standard Tudor swear words. God's teeth. And that was the equivalent of Tudor's "oh my god." And literally, you could actually be jailed for saying that. And then you have things like "by the rood," R-O-O-D, like rood. By the rood, by the rood, I don't know how it's said. And that was swearing by the Holy Cross. Risky behaviour for a Sunday afternoon. Now we're going to move on to legendary insults, many of which you'll actually find buried in Shakespeare's sassiest lines. "Thou pribbling, ill-natured knave." Translation: "You petty, badly raised idiot." "Thou roguish, hedge-born scullion." Scullion seems to be a word that was used in the Victorian times as well. But anyway, that means you're dishonest, ditch-born dish scrubber. Which, that sounds so rude. Like, what's a ditch-born dish scrubber? That's even hard to say. Try and say that quickly. Ditch-born dish scrubber. This one, it makes me laugh actually. And you could kind of use it today. "I do desire we may be better strangers." In other words, fuck off out of my life. Right, so now, beyond swearing and insults, the Tudors had some savage little sayings. "He hath the face only a mother could love." We've heard this one. Do you know what I mean? We hear that. That's timeless. That's ruthless. And it's still iconic. You know, people do still use that today, which is so interesting to think that that's like all the way back from the 1500s. The next one, "as full of wind as bagpipes." That kind of, I assume, means that someone who never shuts up. Kind of like me. I kind of love it though. "To have a tongue sharper than a serpent's tooth." Proper like mean things to say, you know, I'm assuming it's like that. And this one I actually kind of like. I think this one we could use today. It is, "all that glisters is not gold." And that's kind of like, don't trust people just because they sparkle. Like, don't trust people just because they think they know everything. Like, do you know what I mean? Just be careful. Or don't just trust people just because they're rich. It could mean something like that, I suppose. Like King Henry VIII, don't trust him because he's rich, because you know, if you're some woman, yeah, he might just chop your head off like he did to many people. So let's look into how we could potentially use some of these phrases today, because that's what I think is hilarious. Because as I said, they just, I don't know how these could actually fit into our day-to-day lives nowadays. You know, if you have like an office micromanager, you could sit there and just say to them, "Thou art a lumpish, hedge-born knave." And if you ever get a text from your ex, just message them back and be like, "I do desire we may be better strangers." That's like harsh, like that's deep, that's like, you know, I kind of like that as well. So elegant, brutal, period accurate, you know, 1530s flair, there you go. Speak like King Henry VIII. Or Anne Boleyn, or whoever you want to be, because they blatantly use these words. I would like to think that they use these words anyway. And today, my friends, that concludes the completely unnecessary but entirely delightful descend into my mad Tudor insult rabbit hole. And remember to drop your favourite insults into the comments below. Until next time, my friends, may your tea be hot and your enemies be scullions. Bye.